Lucas had always loved the quiet of his ranch. The sun rose slowly over the rolling hills, painting the grass in gold. Birds sang from the trees lining the creek, and the gentle wind carried the scent of wildflowers across the fields. This was his home, the place his family had cared for generations, and every corner of it told a story. The barn, the fences, the old oak tree in the middle of the pasture, all of it was part of his life. He had moved here as a young man, taking over the ranch from his father. Over the years, he had worked hard to maintain it. He repaired fences after storms, planted trees, and made sure the creek ran clear. Life here was simple, peaceful, and full of satisfaction. Lucas enjoyed the rhythm of his days, early mornings checking the livestock, afternoons fixing equipment or tending the fields, and evenings watching the sky turn colors as the sun sank behind the hills. But that morning, something felt wrong. As Lucas sipped his coffee on the porch, he noticed dust clouds rising from the edge of his property. At first, he thought it might be a passing truck, but the dust didn't fade. He squinted into the distance and saw a row of orange cones and machines digging long trenches across the land. His heart sank. He grabbed his hat and walked toward the intrusion, his boots crunching on the gravel road. As he approached, he saw a group of men working efficiently, laying pipes and moving soil. They were loud and purposeful, oblivious to the presence of anyone else. "Excuse me," Lucas called out. One of the men, wearing a hard hat and a bright vest, turned. "Yes," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "This is my property," Lucas said firmly. "What are you doing here?" The man smiled, but it was a polite, practiced smile. "We're building a pipeline for the community," he said. "The HOA has the legal right to run this through the area. You don't have to worry. It's all approved." Lucas felt his jaw tighten. "The HOA?" he repeated. "I've lived here for 20 years. I've never signed anything giving them permission to dig on my land." The man shrugged. "It's all taken care of. You'll see. The water will help the neighborhood." Lucas clenched his fist but forced himself to stay calm. He knew that anger alone wouldn't help. He had to understand the situation first. He spent the morning walking along the edge of his ranch, inspecting the machinery and talking to the workers. None of them could show him official permission, only documents that referenced agreements he had never signed. By midday, Lucas returned to his porch, frustrated and uneasy. He could see the long pipeline stretching across his land like a foreign vein. It cut through fields where he had planted flowers near the creek where his family's water had flowed for generations. The intrusion wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. It was a challenge to everything he valued about this land. That evening, Lucas lit a fire in the backyard and sat staring at the flames. Memories of his childhood on this ranch came back to him, helping his father mend the fences, catching tadpoles in the creek, learning to ride a horse across the open fields. His father had always said that a ranch was more than land. It was a legacy. And now, that legacy felt threatened. Lucas knew he couldn't let the pipeline continue without confronting it. But he also understood that rushing in without knowledge could be disastrous. He needed facts, proof, and a plan. He spent hours in the light of the fire, thinking through his options. He knew that the HOA had influence, but they did not have the same rights he did. Water rights on his ranch were legally protected, passed down from his family, and they gave him control over the water flowing through his land. The next morning, Lucas set out to gather evidence. He drove into town to the county office carrying notebooks, maps, and his father's old property records. He spent the day digging through legal documents, reading letters, and comparing old maps to the new pipeline route. Slowly, a clear picture emerged. The pipeline did not have legal access to his property. The HOA had assumed that because they controlled nearby land, they could build without objection. But Lucas had water rights that predated their community. In fact, the creek that ran through his ranch was the primary source for the pipeline. Without his permission, the water could not flow legally to the HOA. Lucas felt a surge of both relief and determination. Relief because the law was on his side, and determination because he now had the means to protect his land. But he also understood that this was delicate. He could not act recklessly. He needed to be strategic, calm, and firm. On his way back to the ranch, Lucas stopped at a local lawyer's office. The lawyer, an older man with years of experience in property and water law, listened carefully as Lucas explained the situation. He nodded slowly. "You're in a strong position," the lawyer said. Water rights are taken very seriously here. If you control the source, you have legal authority to regulate who uses it. But you must handle this carefully. Aggression could backfire. You need clear documentation and a calm approach. Lucas felt a sense of purpose. He wasn't looking for revenge. He wanted respect for his property and family heritage. He wanted the HOA to understand that the land and water belonged to him, and that any use without permission would be illegal. Back on the ranch, Lucas walked along the creek in the fading light. The water flowed gently, glinting in the evening sun. He remembered teaching his younger brother how to fish here, and how his father had taught him to check the water for clarity and flow. This creek was the heart of the ranch, and now it had become the center of a battle. He sat on a large rock, thinking through his plan. First, he would secure the water rights documentation and ensure everything was in order. Next, he would make it clear to the HOA that he controlled the water source. Finally, he would negotiate terms that protected his land and allowed the community to use water only under fair agreement. Lucas also understood that patience would be key. The HOA had influence, but they were not above the law. He would not make hasty decisions, and he would not allow emotion to dictate his actions. Calm, firm, and strategic. That was his approach. That night, as the stars appeared over the hills, Lucas felt a quiet resolve. He loved this ranch, and he would protect it. The pipeline, the machinery, the interference, it was all an intrusion, but it was not the end. His family's land, his heritage, and his water rights would not be taken without a fight that was smart, lawful, and unwavering. Lucas went to bed with a sense of purpose. Tomorrow he would begin the next phase of his plan. The pipeline might stretch across his land now, but he held the ultimate control, the water itself. And with that control, he could ensure that his ranch and his family's legacy were respected. The night was silent, except for the gentle rustle of leaves. The ranch was still his, and Lucas was ready to defend it, not with anger but with knowledge, law, and determination. The first part of the challenge had begun, and Lucas was prepared to face it step by step with the patience and strength that came from a lifetime on this land. The next morning, Lucas woke before sunrise. The sky was still dark, and the first light of dawn painted the horizon in soft pink and orange hues. He sipped his coffee slowly, thinking about the events of the previous day. The pipeline was still running across his ranch, and the workers were active, unaware that their presence was being carefully observed. Lucas knew he needed more than determination. He needed knowledge. He had some familiarity with the law from years of handling ranch affairs, but this situation required precise understanding. The HOA had assumed they could take control of water that flowed through his property. Lucas knew that assumption was wrong, but he needed concrete proof. He drove into town, heading toward the county courthouse. The morning air was crisp and carried the faint scent of the creek and the nearby fields. At the courthouse, Lucas spent hours sifting through old property records, maps, and legal documents. Some papers were yellowed and fragile, others freshly printed. He examined deeds, easements, and water rights registrations. Each document told a story, and slowly, the full story of his land emerged. Lucas discovered that his family's ranch had water rights dating back decades. These rights were more than just a claim. They were legally protected. No organization, not even a homeowners association, could override them without explicit agreement. He felt a surge of relief. The law was on his side, but only if he acted wisely. He also found that the creek running through his land was the primary source for the HOA's pipeline. Without the legal authority to access the creek, their construction could not operate fully. This was the key to his plan. Lucas realized he could protect his land and ensure fairness while also allowing the HOA to use the water, but only under conditions he controlled. After hours in the courthouse, Lucas met with a local lawyer named Mr. Bennett. The lawyer was in his 70s, with a kind face lined with experience and wisdom. Lucas explained everything: the pipeline, the HOA's assumptions, and the water rights documents he had found. Mr. Bennett listened carefully, nodding occasionally. "You have a very strong position," he said finally. "Water rights are serious in this state. Whoever controls the source has legal authority. You can restrict usage, and anyone using the water without permission could be liable, but you must proceed carefully. Aggressive actions could backfire. You need to communicate clearly, document everything, and be ready for negotiations." Lucas absorbed the advice. He wasn't looking to punish anyone. He wanted respect and fairness. But he also realized that being passive would allow the HOA to assume control. His family's legacy and the integrity of the ranch could not be compromised. Driving back to the ranch, Lucas felt a mixture of calm and determination. The pipeline was still visible across the fields, and workers moved along it, unaware that the source of the water belonged to him. He parked near the edge of the creek and examined the flow. The water sparkled in the sunlight, moving steadily through the landscape. This creek had nurtured his family's crops, provided for the livestock, and sustained life on the ranch. It was the heart of the property, and now it was the center of a legal and strategic challenge. Lucas began drafting a plan. First, he would secure all documentation of his water rights, including maps, historical records, and legal registrations. Second, he would inform the HOA formally that he controlled the water source. Third, he would set terms for its use, ensuring that the ranch and its resources were protected. He wanted a solution that was fair, legal, and final. To prepare for the HOA's possible resistance, Lucas also thought about practical measures. He could monitor the water flow, ensure that any use complied with legal standards, and keep records of the creek's condition. By combining legal authority with careful observation, he could strengthen his position without confrontation. That evening, Lucas walked along the creek. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land. He remembered time spent fishing here with his brother, teaching younger cousins how to build small rafts and helping his father measure the flow for irrigation. The creek was more than water. It was history, memory, and life. Protecting it meant preserving everything he valued. Lucas spent hours organizing his files, reviewing maps, and making notes about every important detail. He also considered potential reactions from the HOA. They might try to negotiate aggressively, or they might attempt to pressure him with community politics. He reminded himself that knowledge and patience were his best allies. Acting wisely now would prevent problems later. The night was calm, filled with the gentle sound of water flowing and leaves rustling in the wind. Lucas sat on a bench near the creek thinking. He knew the HOA would eventually have to face the reality of the law. Without permission to use the water, their pipeline could not function properly. This was leverage, but it was leverage that came with responsibility. Lucas was determined to use it wisely. The next day, he took his research further. He visited the local library and studied state water laws, past court cases involving similar disputes, and precedents for water rights enforcement. Each case provided insight into how disputes could unfold. He noted that courts generally favored those with long-standing rights who acted reasonably and documented everything thoroughly. Lucas also began drafting letters to the HOA. These were not letters of anger, but of information. He planned to explain the legal status of the water, the need for formal permission, and his willingness to negotiate fair terms. His approach was calm, professional, and assertive. By midday, Lucas had compiled an impressive collection of evidence. Maps, historical deeds, water measurements, photographs, and legal references were all organized in a binder. He knew that when the time came to present his case, he would be ready. Returning to the ranch, Lucas saw the pipeline workers continuing their tasks. He walked along the edge of the field, observing without confronting. There was a sense of quiet determination within him. This was not just about stopping the pipeline. It was about protecting a family legacy, upholding the law, and setting a standard for fairness. That evening, Lucas reviewed his plan again. He would first send a formal notice to the HOA, clearly stating his control over the water rights. He would offer terms for use that were reasonable, ensuring that the HOA could access water legally while respecting the ranch. If negotiations were required, he was ready to attend meetings, armed with documentation and legal support. Lucas also thought about long-term measures. He could install monitoring equipment on the creek, ensuring that water flow remained stable and that any usage was properly recorded. He could work with local authorities to confirm boundaries and rights, preventing future disputes. By planning carefully, he could protect the ranch for decades to come. Finally, as the sun set and the sky turned deep blue, Lucas felt a sense of calm. The work ahead was challenging, but he was prepared. The ranch, the creek, and his family's legacy were worth every effort. He understood that patience, knowledge, and careful action were more powerful than anger or rash moves. Lucas looked across the fields, watching the pipeline glint in the fading light. He knew this was only the beginning of the challenge, but he also knew that he held the key, the water itself. As long as he remained firm, informed, and fair, the ranch and everything he cherished would remain protected. That night, he slept with the quiet confidence of someone who knew his rights and was ready to defend them thoughtfully. Tomorrow would bring action, but tonight was for preparation. And in that preparation, Lucas found strength, purpose, and a sense of justice that would guide him through the days ahead. The morning air was crisp and clear as Lucas stepped onto his ranch. The sun had just begun to climb over the hills, casting long shadows across the fields. He could hear the distant hum of machinery. The pipeline, now partially completed, stretched across his land like a silent challenge. Today, he would take the first step in defending his water rights. Lucas grabbed his folder, filled with documents, maps, and legal papers. His lawyer, Mr. Bennett, had advised him to remain calm but firm. Knowledge, not anger, would be his strongest weapon. Lucas knew the HOA workers would continue their task unless someone stopped them with clear authority. Today, that someone would be him. As he approached the pipeline, he noticed the workers moving efficiently, placing pipes and connecting joints. The project manager, a man named Harris, waved at him. "Morning, Mr. Lucas. Ready for some coffee?" he said with a polite smile. Lucas nodded, but his mind was focused. "I need to speak with you about this pipeline," he said firmly. Harris motioned for the workers to pause and came closer. "Sure, what's the issue?" "This pipeline crosses my property," Lucas said, holding out his folder. "I have legal water rights for this land, including the creek that feeds your system. You do not have permission to use this water, and the pipeline cannot function legally without my consent." Harris glanced at the folder but remained skeptical. "Mr. Lucas, the HOA has approvals. You can't just block the water." Lucas remained calm. "I understand your position, but I also understand the law. These documents prove that I control the source. I can allow water use under certain conditions, but until we agree on those conditions, you cannot proceed." Harris frowned and stepped back. "We'll need to review this." He gestured to the workers, who stopped moving, sensing tension in the air. Lucas took a deep breath. "I am not trying to create conflict. I want a fair solution, but I will protect my property and my family's water rights. I suggest we discuss terms before any more construction happens." The workers exchanged glances. None of them had expected resistance. Many had assumed the HOA had full authority. But Lucas's calm authority, supported by legal documentation, changed the situation. Harris pulled out his phone and called someone. Lucas overheard him saying, "He has documents and he knows the law. We may need legal counsel before proceeding." Lucas nodded silently. This was exactly what he had planned. By being prepared and professional, he had shifted the power dynamic. The HOA could not continue without acknowledging his rights. After a few minutes, Harris turned back. "Mr. Lucas, I need to report this to the board. They will want to negotiate terms." "You're serious about this, I can see that." "I am," Lucas replied, "and I am willing to find a solution that respects both my property and the community's needs. But the pipeline cannot use my water until that solution is agreed upon." With that, Harris signaled the workers to step back. The site was quiet except for the gentle sound of the creek flowing nearby. Lucas felt a sense of control he hadn't felt since he first noticed the machinery. Today he had made a stand without anger or confrontation. He had made it with law, clarity, and calm authority. Later that morning, Lucas returned to the ranch house. He prepared formal letters to the HOA, outlining his water rights, the legal foundation for his control of the creek, and his willingness to negotiate terms. He attached copies of deeds, maps, and historical records. Every detail was documented carefully. By noon, the HOA had received the letters. Within a few hours, Harris returned, this time with 2 board members from the HOA. They were polite but clearly cautious. "Mr. Lucas," one of them began, "we received your documents. We understand that you have legal water rights. We want to work with you. Let's discuss how we can resolve this." Lucas nodded. "I appreciate that. My goal is to protect my land while allowing the community to access water under fair terms. I am not unreasonable, but my property must be respected." The discussion lasted for hours. Lucas explained the significance of the creek, the historical rights attached to it, and the conditions under which he could allow use. He suggested that the HOA pay for maintenance of the section crossing his land and agree to not disturb the surrounding fields or structures. The board members asked questions, some challenging, some curious. Lucas remained calm, answering each with clarity and reference to the documentation. His approach was firm but fair, demonstrating that he was knowledgeable and reasonable. As the sun began to set, the meeting concluded with a preliminary agreement. The HOA would halt any further construction until final terms were drafted. Lucas had made it clear the pipeline could not function without his permission, and his water rights were legally enforceable. After the meeting, Lucas walked along the creek. The water flowed gently, reflecting the colors of the sunset. He felt a sense of accomplishment. Today was the first real victory. He had defended his property without anger, without confrontation, but with authority and law on his side. That night, Lucas prepared for the next steps. He knew the HOA would want a formal contract, and he needed to ensure every detail protected the ranch and its resources. He drafted proposals, listed maintenance responsibilities, and considered long-term monitoring of the water flow. Everything had to be clear, precise, and fair. The ranch was quiet, with only the sound of the creek and the gentle rustling of leaves. Lucas reflected on the day's events. He realized that standing firm did not require aggression. It required knowledge, preparation, and the courage to act. He had taken the first step in ensuring his family's legacy remained intact. Lucas also considered the community. He wanted to ensure that the HOA and its residents could access water if needed, but it had to be on terms that respected the land. This balance of fairness and protection would be his guiding principle. Over the next few days, Lucas continued to monitor the site. The workers were present but did not advance the pipeline. Each day he walked along the creek, checking the water flow, noting any changes and maintaining detailed records. He took photographs of the pipeline and the surrounding land, ensuring that any future disputes could be addressed with evidence. The HOA representatives visited occasionally, discussing progress and logistics. Lucas maintained his calm authority, making it clear that the land and water were under his control until a formal agreement was reached. This patient yet firm stance earned him respect, even from those who had initially assumed he would back down. Lucas also spent time thinking strategically. He considered potential objections the HOA might raise, the legal precedents that could be cited, and the best ways to ensure long-term protection of the ranch. His plan was meticulous, covering every detail of water use, maintenance, and legal responsibility. As the days passed, Lucas felt a growing confidence. The pipeline no longer symbolized intrusion but opportunity, a chance to establish clear boundaries, enforce rights, and create a fair agreement. He knew that the next phase would involve negotiations and contracts, but he was ready. He had prepared thoroughly, acted with authority, and maintained control without confrontation. One evening, as the sky turned deep purple and the stars began to appear, Lucas sat by the creek. He watched the water flow, thinking of the days ahead. The stand he had taken was not just about a pipeline or water. It was about respect, fairness, and the preservation of a family legacy. He felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that he had faced the challenge wisely, with patience and knowledge. Lucas rose and walked back to the ranch house. The pipeline remained paused, the workers waiting for further instructions. The HOA had learned that the land and water were not theirs to claim without consent. Lucas had made his stand, and the message was clear. The ranch, its resources, and its legacy were protected. As he settled into his chair that night, Lucas knew the next steps would be crucial. Formal agreements would need to be drafted, legal terms defined, and long-term arrangements made. But he also knew that he had set the tone, calm, fair, and firm. And with that foundation, he was confident that his ranch would remain secure, his water rights respected, and his family's legacy preserved for generations to come. The morning sun shone brightly over the ranch, casting long shadows across the fields. Lucas stood at the edge of the creek, watching the water ripple gently over rocks and past reeds. The pipeline had been paused, the HOA workers waiting for further instructions, and the ranch felt calm, though a quiet tension lingered in the air. Today would be important. Today he would negotiate with the HOA. Lucas had spent days preparing. He had organized all the legal documents proving his water rights, mapped the creek's flow, and documented every aspect of his land that could be affected by the pipeline. He had also thought carefully about the terms he would propose, conditions that would protect his property while allowing the HOA to use the water fairly. By mid-morning, 2 board members from the HOA arrived. They were polite, but their eyes revealed caution. They had heard of Lucas's thorough preparation and knew they were facing someone who would not back down without a fair discussion. "Good morning, Mr. Lucas," said one of the board members. "We appreciate you meeting with us. We want to resolve this matter quickly and fairly." Lucas nodded. "Good morning. I appreciate your willingness to discuss this. I believe we can reach an agreement, but it must respect my property and the water rights that come with it." He spread out maps and documents on a portable table he had set up by the creek. Photographs showed the pipeline route, diagrams explained the water flow, and historical documents proved his family's long-standing rights. The HOA board members examined the materials carefully. "We understand that the creek runs through your property and that you have legal control over the water," one of them said. "We did not intend to cause conflict. Our goal is simply to provide water for the community." Lucas nodded calmly. "I understand the community's needs. I am willing to work with you, but the pipeline cannot function legally without my consent. I am proposing terms that allow use while protecting my property. This includes maintenance fees for the section crossing my land, restrictions to prevent damage, and clear monitoring of water flow." The board members whispered to each other, reviewing the documents and consulting briefly. "We are concerned about cost and logistics," said one. "Can these terms be fair to both sides?" Lucas smiled slightly. "Fairness is the goal. The maintenance fee is reasonable for the size of the section crossing my property. Restrictions are minimal but necessary to protect the ranch. Monitoring ensures that usage is controlled and prevents disputes in the future. This approach benefits both parties and ensures long-term cooperation." The discussion continued for hours. Lucas remained calm, answering every question with clarity and reference to the documents. He explained that the creek's flow was vital for his livestock, crops, and the health of the land. Any misuse of the water could damage the ranch, creating long-term problems. He emphasized that responsible use and cooperation would protect both the community and his property. The board members listened closely, clearly impressed by Lucas's preparation and knowledge. They realized that proceeding without an agreement could lead to legal complications and delays. The power of the situation had shifted. The HOA wanted access to water, but Lucas controlled the source. He had leverage and he used it wisely. Finally, one board member spoke. "Mr. Lucas, we believe your terms are fair. We are willing to draft a formal agreement based on your proposals. We want this resolved quickly and respectfully." Lucas nodded. "That is acceptable. The agreement should include maintenance responsibilities, usage limits, and clear legal terms to prevent future disputes. Once that is in place, the pipeline can resume operation." Over the next few days, both sides worked on the agreement. Lucas collaborated closely with his lawyer, Mr. Bennett, ensuring that every clause protected the ranch and clarified his rights. The HOA provided their legal representatives, and negotiations continued with patience and careful attention to detail. During this period, Lucas also implemented practical measures. He installed monitoring tools along the creek to measure water flow and record usage. He documented any maintenance performed on the pipeline crossing his land. By taking these steps, he ensured transparency and created a record that would support the agreement. One afternoon, as the sun warmed the fields, Lucas walked along the pipeline route. Workers were present but limited their activity, respecting the pause until the agreement was finalized. Lucas observed the machinery carefully, noting any potential impact on the land. His thorough approach reflected not only his commitment to fairness but also his dedication to protecting the ranch. Even with the HOA cooperating, Lucas remained vigilant. He knew that agreements could be tested if not enforced carefully. By monitoring the creek, documenting everything, and maintaining communication, he ensured that the final arrangement would be effective and sustainable. Finally, after several days of negotiation, the formal agreement was ready. It outlined the HOA's legal use of the water, the maintenance responsibilities, and the monitoring system. It specified that the pipeline could operate only under the agreed terms, with clear accountability for both parties. Lucas signed the agreement with a sense of satisfaction. The pipeline could now function, but on terms that respected his property and water rights. The HOA representatives also signed, acknowledging the fairness and legality of the arrangement. After the signing, Lucas walked along the creek, watching the water flow steadily over rocks and through reeds. The pipeline, once a symbol of intrusion, now represented cooperation and mutual respect. He felt a quiet pride in how he had handled the situation. He had not reacted with anger or confrontation. Instead, he had relied on preparation, knowledge, and calm authority. Over the next few weeks, the pipeline became fully operational. Maintenance was performed according to the agreement, and the HOA paid fees for the section crossing Lucas's land. The creek remained healthy and the ranch continued to thrive. Lucas's careful monitoring ensured that water usage stayed within limits, protecting both the land and the community's access. Neighbors from the HOA began to visit the ranch occasionally, bringing greetings and appreciation for Lucas's fair approach. Some had initially assumed he would resist or act aggressively, but they soon saw his commitment to fairness, law, and long-term cooperation. Respect replaced tension and relationships improved. Lucas also reflected on the experience. He realized that standing firm did not require hostility. Knowledge, preparation, and patience were powerful tools. By understanding his rights and acting responsibly, he had protected his land, established clear boundaries, and created a fair solution for everyone involved. As autumn approached, the ranch looked more beautiful than ever. The grass turned golden, the creek sparkled in the sunlight, and the fields were full of life. Lucas walked along the water's edge, feeling a sense of accomplishment. The HOA had learned an important lesson. Respect, fairness, and law must guide actions, even when the goal is community service. Lucas continued to maintain the ranch carefully. The pipeline was a reminder that challenges could arise unexpectedly, but preparation and knowledge could overcome them. His family's legacy was intact, and the water, which had once been a point of conflict, now symbolized cooperation and mutual benefit. In the evenings, Lucas sat on his porch watching the sun dip below the hills. The ranch was peaceful, the water flowed freely, and he felt content knowing that he had acted wisely. He had defended his property without anger, negotiated with fairness, and ensured that his family's land would remain protected for generations. The events of the past weeks had taught him more than legal lessons. They had reinforced the value of patience, strategy, and calm authority. Challenges would always arise, but with careful planning and knowledge, they could be met and resolved without unnecessary conflict. Lucas smiled as the stars appeared in the night sky. The creek continued its steady flow, the pipeline hummed quietly in the distance, and the ranch remained secure. Today, he had turned a potential conflict into a story of respect, fairness, and thoughtful action. The stand he had taken and the agreements he had negotiated ensured that the ranch would thrive, the water would be protected, and his family's legacy would endure. And as he watched the gentle movement of water over stones and reeds, Lucas knew one important truth. Strength was not measured by force, but by knowledge, preparation, and the courage to stand firm while acting wisely. The morning sun rose gently over Lucas's ranch, casting golden light across the fields and sparkling on the creek. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wild grass and fresh earth. After weeks of preparation, negotiation, and careful observation, Lucas finally felt a sense of calm that he hadn't experienced since the pipeline first appeared. The HOA had accepted the agreement in full. The pipeline could now operate legally across his land. But under strict terms, maintenance responsibilities were clearly defined, monitoring of water flow was established, and any usage beyond agreed limits was prohibited. For Lucas, this was not just about the water. It was about respect, fairness, and the preservation of a family legacy. As he walked along the creek that morning, he reflected on the events that had unfolded. The intrusion had been unexpected, the threat to his land real. But through careful preparation, knowledge, and calm authority, he had turned a potential conflict into a cooperative arrangement. The pipeline, once a symbol of disruption, now represented negotiation, respect, and mutual benefit. Lucas paused near a bend in the creek, where the water flowed gently over smooth stones. He thought about the workers who had laid the pipes. None of them had intended harm. They were simply following instructions. But even without ill intent, The lack of understanding of water rights had caused tension. Lucas had used that moment to educate, negotiate, and protect what was rightfully his. Later in the morning, the HOA board members visited the ranch again, this time not to negotiate, but to express appreciation. "Lucas," said one of the members, smiling, "we wanted to thank you for your approach. Your preparation, fairness, and willingness to communicate made this process much easier than we expected." Lucas nodded. "I believe in fairness," he said. "The land belongs to my family, but the water can help the community if it is used responsibly." That was the goal from the start: respect and cooperation. Another board member added, "We also learned an important lesson about property rights and responsibility. Your approach showed us that patience and careful action can achieve more than force or assumption." Lucas smiled quietly, appreciating the acknowledgement. He had not sought recognition, only respect for the ranch and its water. Now he had achieved both. Throughout the day, Lucas checked the creek and the pipeline. The water flowed steadily, unobstructed, and healthy. Monitoring equipment confirmed usage stayed within agreed limits, and maintenance crews followed his instructions for preserving the surrounding land. He felt confident that the agreement would hold long-term and that the ranch remained protected. As weeks turned into months, life on the ranch returned to its peaceful rhythm. Lucas continued his daily routines, checking the fields, tending the livestock, and walking along the creek. Yet now there was an added sense of security. He knew that the HOA would not attempt to bypass the agreement, and that any future concerns could be addressed calmly, using the clear framework they had established. The community, too, benefited. Water from the creek now reached the HOA's pipeline reliably, and residents began to recognize the importance of respecting the land and those who controlled it. Some even visited Lucas, offering greetings and small gestures of thanks. The tension that had marked the arrival of the pipeline had dissolved into understanding and mutual respect. One afternoon, Lucas invited a few HOA representatives to join him for a walk along the creek. Together they observed the water, discussed its flow, and checked the surrounding land. "This is remarkable," one board member said. "I didn't realize how much thought and care goes into managing a ranch in the creek. It's more than just water. It's life for your land and livestock." Lucas nodded. "It's important to understand the value of the resources we share. Respecting boundaries and rights ensures everyone benefits in the long run." The representatives left with a better understanding of the ranch and the importance of cooperation. Lucas felt a quiet satisfaction in seeing education and respect replacing misunderstanding and tension. As the seasons changed, the ranch flourished. The fields were full of life, the creek ran clear and steady, and the pipeline operated within the agreed framework. Lucas continued to document water flow and maintenance, ensuring the agreement remained effective. The ranch had weathered a significant challenge, and it had emerged stronger with clear rules and respect established. Lucas often reflected on the lessons learned during this period. He realized that standing firm did not require hostility. Knowledge, preparation, and patience were more powerful than confrontation. By understanding his rights and acting responsibly, he had protected his land and created a lasting solution. The pipeline, once a symbol of intrusion, had become a symbol of balance and fairness. The HOA respected his property, and Lucas had ensured that the water could be used sustainably. Everyone involved had gained a clearer understanding of rights, responsibilities, and cooperation. One evening, Lucas walked along the creek, the water reflecting the orange and purple hues of the setting sun. He thought about the journey over the past weeks, the shock of the initial intrusion, the long hours at the courthouse, the careful planning, and the negotiations. It had been a challenging period, but it had reinforced his confidence and determination. He paused near a bend where the water flowed gently over a small waterfall. The sound was soothing, a reminder of the ranch's resilience and the importance of careful stewardship. Lucas had not only protected his property, but had also ensured that the land and water could support life for generations to come. Back at the ranch house, Lucas reviewed his final records of the negotiations and agreements. Everything was documented, organized, and secure. He had created a system that would prevent future disputes and maintain clarity for both the ranch and the HOA. As night fell, Lucas sat on his porch, gazing at the stars above. The ranch was quiet. The creek flowed steadily and the pipeline operated smoothly within the agreed terms. The tension of previous weeks had disappeared, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and peace. Lucas realized that this experience had strengthened not only the ranch, but also his understanding of leadership, fairness, and responsibility. Standing firm and acting wisely had protected his family's legacy, while cooperation had ensured a positive outcome for the community. In the days that followed, neighbors from the HOA occasionally visited, bringing greetings and updates about the pipeline. Some offered small tokens of appreciation, homegrown vegetables, baked goods, or simple notes of thanks. Lucas accepted these gestures politely, but he remained focused on the larger goal, maintaining fairness and protecting the ranch. The ranch continued to thrive through the changing seasons. Crops grew strong, livestock remained healthy, and the creek maintained a steady, healthy flow. The pipeline ran smoothly, monitored and maintained under the agreed framework. Lucas's careful planning had ensured long-term success. One sunny afternoon, as he walked along the creek, Lucas reflected on the journey. What had begun as an intrusion had transformed into an opportunity. He had learned the value of preparation, patience, and negotiation. He had discovered the power of knowledge and the importance of acting calmly, confidently, and fairly. Lucas also thought about the community. They had gained access to water, but they had also gained a deeper respect for the land and those who protect it. The HOA now understood that rights and responsibilities must go hand in hand. Cooperation, not assumption, created lasting solutions. As the day ended and the sun dipped below the horizon, Lucas felt a deep sense of contentment. His ranch, the creek, and the family legacy were secure. The challenges of the past months had tested him, but they had also strengthened his resolve, patience, and understanding. The ranch was once again peaceful. The pipeline, once a source of tension, now represented collaboration. The water flowed freely, the land remained protected, and the HOA operated within the framework Lucas had carefully established. Respect, fairness, and clear agreements had replaced conflict and uncertainty. Lucas stood at the edge of the creek one last time that evening, watching the water shimmer in the twilight. He smiled quietly, knowing that he had done more than protect water or land. He had demonstrated the importance of standing firm, understanding rights, and acting with patience and wisdom. The ranch was safe, the agreement was clear, and the legacy would continue. With the stars beginning to appear and the night settling over the hills, Lucas returned to his porch. The ranch was calm, the creek sang softly, and the pipeline flowed smoothly. He knew that life would continue, challenges would come, and new situations might arise, but he was prepared. Knowledge, patience, and fairness would guide him, as they had through this challenge, and as he sat quietly, listening to the gentle sound of water over the rocks, Lucas felt a profound sense of satisfaction. The ranch was his home, the water his responsibility, and the legacy of his family was secure. He had faced intrusion with wisdom, defended his land without conflict, and created a solution that balanced fairness, respect, and law. Lucas knew that this experience would remain a story for generations, a story of courage, preparation, and the quiet strength of standing firm. The ranch, the creek, and the pipeline now symbolized something greater than conflict. They symbolized cooperation, understanding, and enduring respect.